joining me today for a special edition of Island Origins Live is Mr. Douglas Orane. Now, if you are Jamaican and you grew up in the 80s or the 90s and you were into your Grace cock soup and your Grace tomato ketchup, it is not a name that is foreign to you, right? And the last time I spoke with Mr. Orane, he promised me a nice fresh batch of yam that I don't see it.
Well, I'm working on the export of it, and I believe we need to export tenfold more to the United States to keep you all more healthy.
Healthy with a whole bunch of yam available. Absolutely. So, Mr. Orane, we spoke a few weeks ago on the American Friends of Jamaica platform, and at that point we were talking about COVID and the environment and such. But your acumen is business, and I want you to just take your chain is a little nicer than mine. I want you to just pop that out and just show everybody for one moment.
Oh, I wonder how you knew about it. Yes.
I saw you playing with it, and that is your Harvard.
Right. It's my Baker's Scholar medallion. I came in the
Yes.
top 5% of the class at Harvard Business School,
Yes.
which shows that we Jamaicans can do anything we set our minds to. So I really see it as an inspiration to the younger generation coming behind me. But you know what counts more is once you have learned something, what do you do with it?
Right.
That's really the key. And I think that's what I learned after graduating from Harvard Business School. Came back and joined GraceKennedy in 1981, and then worked my way up the organization.
And so starting in 1981, that's actually my very first question, right? So you started in 1981, you worked there for almost 40 years, sorry. But when you started in 1981 and the company started in 1922, that means it was 59 years old. The company was already 59 years old when you started.
I'm impressed with your mental arithmetic.
It's on a piece of paper, right? But when you started with a company that's 59 years old, I can feel from you your ambition that came out of you when you were born, right? And you walked in there with your Baker scholarship. Did you walk into Grace knowing that one day I'm going to take this over and just mash up the place?
No, absolutely not. I have an approach in that. You know, actually, in Jamaica, I never told a soul. I never volunteered once that I was a Harvard MBA. Because I have a view on life. Let people form their own perspective of you by your actions, not what you tell them about what you did in the past. So my approach is, and I'll tell you why I like GraceKennedy and joined the company, and that is their sets of values were very close to mine. In fact, they were completely in sync. Grace, we care. During the 1970s, when I was in a small family business, and I was in my early 20s, I saw Carlton Alexander, the then chairman and CEO of GraceKennedy, leading the private sector to keep it vibrant through those difficult years. And I said, wow, I'm so impressed with the way this company works. And it's so caring at the same time. And so I have a similar set of values that were inculcated in me by my parents. And so it was natural for me to gravitate to the company. What happened at the time is that the 80s were actually a period of great tumultuous events in the business sector because the economy opened up to outside competition. So a company like GraceKennedy was on the defensive against newcomers. And what I realized is, how do I offer my skills to help us come through that? So for the younger generation listening, what I did, I volunteered for every project that nobody else wanted to do. In other words, I made myself useful. So, we have this big problem. Who can we use? Oh, there's Doug. Let's send him to go and do it. And I said, yes. A lot of people don't have that approach. And in fact, from a practical point of view, I always tell youngsters, when you go to a new job, always volunteer to help your peers, because that's what carries you forward. So I worked my way up the organization, and I became the CEO in 1995 and the chairman in 1998. But there's something else that was important to me, and that is I studied overseas twice, once to become an engineer in Scotland and once in business in Boston. And I recognize the Jamaican and the Caribbean diaspora were incredibly emotionally attached to our home countries in the Caribbean. It stayed with me for decades. And then when I got to GraceKennedy, I said, wow, here's an opportunity to link our company with the outside world. Because I realized one of the things also when I got to GraceKennedy and the economy was opened up to globalization, and that is the economy of Jamaica was too small for a company like GraceKennedy, and most important, our employees, because their aspirations were so great. So I realized we had to expand outside of Jamaica, and what better way to do it than to use as the first stepping stones our own Jamaican and Caribbean diaspora. And guess what? It's worked.
It worked. It worked. So you led the company at the time when you became CEO and then chairman. You led the company from being a company that had several brands that were distributing locally, but you brought it to exporting now to over 60 countries and financial services in over a dozen territories. What were the key lessons, because you now mentor people and teach entrepreneurship and how to do some of what, I don't know that anybody can do all of what you did, but some of it. What are the key lessons that you learned on your way from being, starting off as a corporate planner, I don't even know what that means, to becoming chairman and CEO?
Well, actually, the title corporate planner was designed to mean absolutely nothing. It allowed
Cook and bottle washer,
chairman and CEO and the CFO, Raf Diaz, to send me anywhere that they were having a problem to go and fix it. And I actually enjoyed it. One of the things I find in life is that making things work effectively is part of my psyche. That's why I'm a big missionary for increasing productivity in Jamaica. But you mentioned about young people and the role that I played. This always stayed with me. And again, I recognize that nobody is a self-made success in this world. We're dependent on other people. I also recognize early that a company like GraceKennedy, in the food business in particular, and the same is true in traditional financial services as well, it is really not effective or practical, if sometimes even possible, to expand globally within one generation. Nestle is a company I have a lot of respect for. They're the largest food company in the world. They started in the late 19th century in a tiny little town in Switzerland as a milk production company, and they're now the largest food company. But it's taken them over 150 years to do it. So I said, what I am doing needs to be continued by the next generation. So I spent a lot of time on succession planning. I retired as CEO on June 30th, 2011. Don Webby succeeded me the next day. And the company has continued to grow and sustain itself even faster than when I was there. And I tell you, there's no greater joy than that.
What were you two talking about in this conversation?
Well, how to make the 2020 vision work, because we created a 2020 vision in 1996 to say what we want the company to look like in 2020, which is what we are today, which is a global consumer group in food and financial services.
Right.
And one, most importantly, that's creating the increase in productivity to meet the aspirations of our employees and the communities in which we live. That is crucially important. But I tell you, one of the greatest thrills in my life now, which really confirms my belief in succession planning. I love to walk around on the road because people come up to me all the time on those chat on the street. And every 2 weeks or so, somebody comes up to me and says, "Hi, Mr. Webby, you're doing such a good job."
I guess
you've made my day. First of all, I'm looking very young. And Don is doing obviously a great job running GraceKennedy, if you feel that way. But I really do believe very strongly that one of the things we need to encourage in Jamaica more
Mhm.
is a culture of grooming the younger generation to move forward and run our businesses, our public sector, all our professions, all our activities, because that's the way that you create value from one generation to the next. And
Absolutely.
I encourage my peers to do the same thing. I retired at 63, and
Uh-huh.
here's the big advantage. It has now allowed me to do a lot of activities I've always wanted to do.
So some of the things that I did my homework on you, right? And I found little snippets of things that you've said and done here and there. And I really want any entrepreneur watching this to learn some life lessons from you. You talked about walking around and people walking up to you and saying things. And at a JB, a Jamaica Business Development Corporation lunch and learn, you said, one of the things I found is that behind every complaint is a business opportunity because it indicates an unmet need. And you said you used to walk around downtown when you were at Grace, and people would stop and complain to you about things, and you found the opportunities in that. You talked about being abroad and seeing that there was a vacuum of products of Jamaican, from Jamaica for the diaspora community there, and therein was an opportunity. What are some of those kinds of lessons? Another one, don't be afraid to do something and fail, because that's the way we learn. What are some of those life lessons that you want entrepreneurs to pay attention to?
Okay, well, one of the first ones is to be practical about satisfying unmet needs.
Right.
All the young entrepreneurs watching out there, if you see people lining up in a queue for anything, stop and ask them what are they lining up for, because it's clear that the demand exceeds the supply, or else there wouldn't be a queue. So that gives you a hint of what to look for, and that's why, in my late teens, I recognized that Jamaicans overseas yearn for Jamaican food because they're always complaining they couldn't get it in the United Kingdom. So that's just one example. Be eternally curious. One of the things I have always done from as a child, I love reading. So I read what voraciously, I think is the best term. Once for the entire period from 1981 till I retired in 2011 at GraceKennedy, I subscribed to the Wall Street Journal and read it every day because I got a lot of business ideas, but also it prevented me from becoming too insular in being in a small island economy, which is always a risk that one faces. And what it did is for me to realize how other people are solving problems that we have elsewhere in the world we can implement. So, by the way, I don't read the Wall Street Journal anymore, but I read the New York Times and the Guardian and the Economist online. And there's a huge opportunity for young people today. You have millions and millions of posts online that you can educate yourself with and keep up to date. And one of the things I say to young people, I ask a question when I have sessions with youngsters, because one of my pursuits is to meet with fifth and sixth formers about entrepreneurship across Jamaica. I said, have any of you ever heard of a podcast? You'll be amazed, very few have,
Wow.
like 2 in 50 in the room. I said, listen, all of you have smartphones. You know what your peers in Singapore, in London, and elsewhere in the world, in the United States and Canada, are actually watching or listening to. They're learning maths, sciences, foreign languages, all sorts of things on podcasts, while we are watching last night's dancehall videos or some car accident somewhere in Jamaica. In other words, let's use the tools. Jamaica has one of the greatest penetrations of smartphone technology in the world. We need to use it to educate ourselves. So that's one message. It's not only, of course, for young people at school. It's for all entrepreneurs and all individuals. By the way, I'll just share this with you. I grew up in a family of mainly women,
Uh-huh.
I have two sisters and no brothers and a lot of female first cousins.
Uh-huh.
And when I was a youngster, female attributes like empathy, caring, listening were actually saw as feminine and a sign of weakness. I said, what
Right.
tough.
Right.
Yeah. But today, what the research is showing is that those are the qualities needed to be particularly effective at 21st century leadership. And isn't it should be as no surprise that the countries in the world that have been most successful at suppressing COVID-19 are all led by women, prime minister,
I, I
president.
was I was gonna say if we had a woman president, I think we'd be in a different situation right now in this country where I am.
That is true.
Right.
But the point I'm making is that we need to learn from every source we can. Um, and those skills are crucially much more important. The other reason is that the new generations coming up from the millennials up to whatever generation X, Y, or Z is falling behind, are much more aware of communication. And
Right.
the whole idea of being seen and not heard was for the last century. So one has
Right.
to engage young people in order to get them to be more effective at whatever they do, and that's part of how to do it then
Agreed.
by expressing empathy and inclusiveness.
Look here, there's a rousing conversation going on over here. Clover E. Thompson says, I recall you chipping down the road at carnival time, part I'm sure of the battery recharge. And then Arthur Dunk is asking about your book, which I am going to get to in just a moment. Actually, let's get to the book right now, because you've written a book. It is a few years old, but it's still selling very well. Yes, right. And you've written a book called, let me get the picture up here, The Business of Nation Building. Excerpts from the selected speeches of Douglas Orane. Here you are with a fan at some place here in Jamaica. Where was that? Do you remember taking that
New
picture?
York. Believe it.
Oh, okay. There you go. There,
Yeah.
this shows you
Always
that.
working with the Jamaican diaspora. Yeah.
And it's excerpts from speech, and I was looking for an excerpt from the book ahead of this conversation. I couldn't find one, but I did find a speech, which is where I plucked some things out. What were you trying to achieve? All the reviews obviously are stellar. It's 5-star if you look at it on Amazon, but we actually want you to buy it from IanRandallPublishers.com, I believe it is. Let me put it on screen here. Yes, The Business of Nation Building, excerpts from the selected speech of Douglas Orane, and you can get it at IanRandallPublishers.com. It's on screen here now. So what is it that you wanted to share by sharing these speeches?
Well, I have to thank Don Webby for the genesis of this book, because when I retired, as I said, in 2011, about 6 months after, he said, "Doug, why you don't write a book?" "Do a book?" I said, "Me? Write a book? I've never thought of it." And he said, "Yes, because you have made dozens of speeches. I'm going way back to the early 80s. And I said, "Yes, that's true." In fact, when I counted them up, I'd made over 200 in my career at GraceKennedy. That's one of the things, by the way, that nobody else except Carlton really wanted to speak in public. That's the then late chairman. So they looked around and said, "Who can we send?" "Oh, see, young Orane." To the public. So I did a lot of school graduations initially. But, and it helped me in terms of my ability to speak and engage audiences publicly. So, so I said, "Okay, Don, I'll do it." When I did the first draft, I gave it to a group of what I call readers, about half a dozen people I know well. So what do you think? They said, "Doug, nobody will read this. It's too long and boring." So I said, "Okay, redo, reset." I did it over. There's hardly a segment, as you will see, Caleb, that's longer than a page, and it's full of photographs. And the reason is it's designed for the short attention reader of the 21st century. And that is not only very young people, but also older people, because we're inundated with alternatives for reading. But here is why it's so important. I really I realized that most business people in Jamaica and the Caribbean do not write down their experiences. So we have nothing to go back in history to understand the way business in the Caribbean developed. Whereas in the developed world, people are writing books every day. And so we have this source of information. So what you find at our universities, for example, they're using books from outside the Caribbean to teach business. And because there's such a paucity of Jamaican written books, and this is one of them. So here's the good news. Because the book focuses a lot on entrepreneurship for young people, the Ministry of Education made the decision to buy 1,000 copies and distribute it to the 6 forms across Jamaica to use as a reference book for CAPE entrepreneurship. For those abroad, CAPE is what used to be higher school certificate or A levels.
I didn't know it the first 2 you said already.
Well, that's right. And so students can use that now, and I offered to have rap sessions with them about entrepreneurship. And it's one of the most joyous experiences in my life to be in those sessions. The last one I did pre-COVID was Guys Hill High, way up in the hills of St. Anne. And the kids are so entrepreneurial. It's amazing how many of them want to start businesses and run them themselves, and we need to encourage them and help them to get to the point where they can actually get started.
And so this book then was kind of almost became a journal of your experience for the 30, if you've been giving speeches for the full 30 plus years.
Yes, that's true. And there are subjects ranging from not only entrepreneurship, but the role of women in our society, philanthropy, education, corporate governance, how the 2020 vision was developed. By the way, for those who are interested in visioning, the speaking notes that I used in January 1996 to launch the GraceKennedy 2020 vision to our staff is reprinted in the book.
Wow.
And I remember so well after I presented it, one of the first questions I got from one of our managers, he says, "But Mr. Orane, this is 1996, isn't 25 years from now, 2020, too far in the future?" Well, we're now in 2020.
I think I remember. Yeah.
In other words, visioning is essential in order to succeed. No, it doesn't mean that you're going to turn out exactly what you said you were going to be 25 years.
How close did you end up coming to the vision that you had?
Well, you can see for yourself. You know all of Grace brands. You can go into a supermarket anywhere in Florida or the East Coast of the United States and see our products. You can use Western Union in 13 countries. In other words, it's work. The question is, would we have seen it exactly like that then? No, of course not. But we had a general direction. It's like sailing a ship. And you say, I'm going somewhere and I know the general direction. You have a fixity of purpose, but you're not locked into that exact course. You move as events unfold around you. But having said that, one of the other advantages of it is about people learning about our history, about how things have worked. And also, I hope to make it both personal and practical so that people can say, oh, I read this segment and it allows me to do something differently. And people have told me that they've actually read a section of it and say, you know, Doug, I thought about what I'm doing differently and I just changed direction. So that's very heartening to me. By the way, Ian Randall Publishers is a Jamaican-owned and run publishing company who have an online service worldwide. And so that's why I'm encouraging you to buy from them.
Right. Very nice. And the Woolmerians are coming out now. So hold on. I need to, if I don't big them up, they're going to get me. Fabian Lyon says, "Thank you for your service to Jamaica, Mr. Orane. Fellow Woolmerian, insightful interview." Arthur Dunk says, "Thank you, sir." I don't know if he's a Woolmerian, but here is Diana Muyong saying, "Proud of you, Douglas Orane, my fellow Woolmerian, and your entrepreneurial vision." Before we wrap it up, I need to to ask about these images that I found of this auditorium full of young ladies in blue and white and young men in khaki at a place I believe is called the Douglas Orane Auditorium. Is that one in the same location?
Same place.
So how does one get one's name on an auditorium? I need a goal for the next My Vision 2030.
Okay. Raise 171 million Jamaican in
Oh dear.
donations,
Okay.
which at the time was about 1.7 million US dollars.
Let me start passing a hat right
And also make the first donation personally, which I did.
Okay.
And the history behind it is the old wooden hall I was in that held 500 of us, burnt down in 1991. When my nephew went to Wolmer's years later, the other boys from other schools teased him. They said, all you Wolmer's boys, they have a suntan on one side of your face because time in the sun outside at assembly. So I said, you know, when I retire, we're going to build a new hall. So in 2011, I started off on it and raised the funds. And interestingly, about half of the funds came from outside of Jamaica, from alumni and friends of Wolmer's. A lot actually came from people who didn't even come to Wolmer's, but felt so strongly about education. And we created an auditorium opened in 2015 that seats 1,800 young people. And I'm just so happy to see it because it's multifunctional. They're actually using it for exams now. So we look at this social distancing. They have the ideal location for it.
Are there any words that you'd like to say to the people who are watching, who are all, less curious about new things and just more grateful to you for sharing everything before we wrap up?
Well, I know you did like the ending for the previous webinar. I won't sing it, but as I said, there is a Jamaican song called Action Not a Bag of Mouth. And for those who are not Jamaican listening or viewing, what does it mean? It means to do more and talk less. So let's go out there and help anyone who surrounds us, particularly in the younger generation, to succeed.
You know what I did want you to sing with me?
What?
I'm going to start and you finish, right? Grace Cock Soup, it's got to be Grace Cock Soup. It's got the flavor, it's got the taste, it's Grace Cock Soup.
Oops.
And you can tell.
I nearly mispronounced one of the words in there.
Oh, Lord. Listen, thank you so much for being on with me today. I appreciate you. All of our viewers appreciate you. Somebody is talking about standing in the sun. I won't bring on everything, but standing in the sun for devotion at Wolmer. So thanks to you for the vision. That's from Michael Andre Hill. I want to thank all of our viewers for watching. You can always reach out to Mr. Orane through his website. And of course, make sure you grab that book at Ian Randall Publishers. I'll put it on screen one more time, The Business of Nation Building. My guest has been Mr. Orane, Mr. Douglas Orane today. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Caleb, and thank you to the audience out there.
Yeah, man, we're all grateful.